Hello, Vida people.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
How are you guys? Did you miss us?
Hey, it's been a while.
Yeah. We did get a message saying what's going on. I hope you all are doing okay. And we've had a very busy week here. We did have a deja vu from last year where our AC leaked in the house, and it did again. But we're so busy we didn't notice for quite a while. And resulted in us having to pull up flooring.
Poor Chris.
It was a disaster.
Yes.
Right. And we still have my room.
Correct.
All over the house.
It's literally about almost half of the house. I had to pull all the flooring up in.
Right. And wipe down and relay it and all kinds of stuff. So we're not done doing that yet. But you do have a lot. Those of you that do have Pando, you do have a lot of ministries that you can watch.
Right.
I'm going to say just a few hellos to Sedgwick Kelly, who is in LeBlanc, I think, right now. And we met him at Telford many years ago. Saint Bada over at Clements, Ricky Noble in Hughes, Mountain View Correctional in Spruce Pine, North Carolina,
awesome.
Arizona State Prison or Winslow, I think it is, Jaderick Willis in Allred, Alfonso Bearfield in Allred, William LaSalle in Wisconsin. And the picture of the real Vida cake.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Somebody made a birthday cake as a real Vida cake.
Right.
It is so cool.
It's pretty cool.
Looks delicious too.
And it looks yummy. I'm imagining it to be lemon cake. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it looks to me like inside would be a lemon cake. Maybe it's
Sounds
not, but
good. Yeah.
oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. Somebody sent me that picture. It's so cool. Brandon Newall in Ohio, hello to you. And the Polensky Seggers.
Awesome.
And Seggers everywhere across the nation. It is amazing how many of them find us in Seg. And they know. And they're like, I think I was sent to Seg for this reason.
Right.
So many of them.
Wow.
But hello to all you Seggers. We love you everywhere. We're going to get back to soon. I wanted to mention, Strange Fire, because there's a lot of strange fire going on.
Wow.
And you know what, you guys? The devil is going to sneak in one way or another. So he's like, okay, let me try this. Oh, shoot, that ain't working. Then let me try something else,
Right.
And so he comes in with an inside job with some strange fire. And that's the best kind of job there always is. Those are the best kind of movies and stories when somebody has an inside job, and that's what the devil does. So we're going to get to that. I also want to do a whole lot of letters. There's so many testimonies I want to share. I am going to do two today, no matter what.
Right.
I did see Charlie Brown and Dragoo on Little Clip videos, and I'm like, those are my homies. What are they doing with them? But they got little clips on God Behind Bars is like, I don't know, Facebook, Instagram, or something like that. But I did see those, and I haven't seen the Giant yet. So I got to go look for the Giant because apparently they got him too.
Awesome.
So anyways, you guys, hello to you guys, Allred. We love you. Thank God we were able to go, a few times, and it won't be our last. Keep us in prayer, everybody, and we are praying for you.
Right.
What new map pins do we have?
We've got several. We've got Wahoo, Nebraska.
Wahoo!
Wahoo, Nebraska. Gig Harbor, Washington, for all you Aggies out there. They say gig 'em, right? So Gig Harbor, Washington. Bedford Hills, New York. Grafton, West Virginia. Hoffman, North Carolina, and South Hill, Virginia are our new map pins this week, and we'll get some pictures up of the map. It's been a minute since we did it.
Walk through those gates, daylight in my eyes. No more barbed wire lies, I survived the ties. Done my time, now I rise. No more alibis, but I do right, leave my past where it lies. Hustle was my prison, now I got the vision. Made the decision, no more bad intentions. Building my redemption, escaping temptations. Life's a new mission, no more false relations. One step at a time, I'm reclaiming mine. Out of the dark, now my future shines. Freedom's not just a word, it's the air I breathe. Gonna break these chains, gonna find my peace. Out from the shadows, stepping into the light. No more wrong turns, gonna live life right. Every move is forward, no looking back. I'm on a new path, no fade to black. Got my feet on the ground, no more running around. Change my dress, it's a whole new town. Street lights guide me, no more hiding. Embracing the truth, no more riding and sliding. Got my family waiting, second chances within. Promise my mama I won't go back again. Opportunities knocking, I'm ready to win. No more bars holding back what's within. Struggles I face, they carved out my fight. Missteps and mistakes, they don't define my night.
I want to also shout out volunteer David Rivera and chaplain Orlando Addison. They're at Martin Correctional in Florida, and we are going to be there really soon in July. July trip is coming very fast.
So cool.
Almost here. I also want to announce, I kind of hinted at this a couple of weeks ago. We have a new announcement about our itinerary. We're going to be at Fountain Correctional in Alabama the day before we go to Holman Correctional in Alabama. And we want to shout out Chaplain James Smoker, who's helped us get all that worked out for those guys. We're looking forward to meeting them there at Fountain CI. Also want to shout out Raymond Aloiso at All Red and all the G5s, and Ronnie Morgan at All Red.
So cool. So you guys, we'll get into more of this later. We put Jay Long's testimony up, and I guess before that was Hog Mob. We got their testimony up, and I got a lot of response, of course, from that, and mostly good. And then there was a couple of letters with some different things. And if you notice, I introduced MC and Dante and said, listen, we all are in different places and we all think differently, right? And what I do know is Hog Mob is 100 for God, right? And that remains the same. And so, but there were people that had some different thoughts or what have you. And you know what? If you don't like somebody's music, or you don't like their interview, or you don't like something they said, it's okay to move on, right? It's okay to realize that not everybody thinks the same. And even like, say, we were talking about, again, even the rabbis of old and the rabbis right now have slightly different interpretations on things, or things that they think. And so when they interviewed the children that they were going to be the disciples, sometimes they would say, come follow me, which meant, yes, you're chosen. I will teach you, or carry on with the trade of your father. And so we are never all going to think the same on everything. You, in fact, would have trouble if it's just you, because you think one way one day another, and we change and we grow, and we should be, every single one of us, until the day we die. Amen. And so you think something today, and in a year or two, you're like, wow, I think I was wrong on that, and now I think this. You know, so that's the way it is. And what I do know is these people love God, and they're working hard in the streets, in the hood, baptizing, taking food, ministering, praying for people, spending their own money and their own time, and doing all they can for God. So anyway, I'm glad that you guys enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed Jay Long's, and maybe we can get up a song of his. I know he don't have a whole lot of videos, especially to the new ones. But we're going to get some music of his out very soon. His mom, did you know his mom is a correctional officer?
Yes. Wow. You just told me that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so apparently they all ran and said, hey, we saw your son.
Let's shout out Jay Long's mom and all the guys there.
And I'm sure she's a good one, you know, a good correctional officer. And we sure need a whole lot of those, as well as wardens and captains and majors. And very soon, you guys, I want to have a prayer day, and then we're going to have a day where we're gonna fast and pray the one day, and the very next day inside we are going to approach, a CO. Hey, can I pray with you? that kind of thing. If you need to make amends with somebody, it's going to be focused on, let's heal the land, right? Let's heal the animosity. Let's change the environment. Let's realize that we're all people and that everybody has problems. Everybody's hurting. Everybody needs Jesus. Everybody needs prayer. Everybody needs friendships. Everybody needs that,
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that, all right, inside across the United States. It's time to change our environment, and it has to start with us, right? It has to start with us. Number one in the mirror. I'm talking about the man in the mirror. Okay. So what else do you got, honey?
I was just going to share this scripture, 2 Corinthians chapter 7. It says, because we have these promises, dear friends, let us cleanse ourselves from everything that can defile our body or spirit, and let us work toward, it's a work in progress, complete holiness, because we fear God.
Amen. I have this letter that I have to read today. I got it a little while ago, like it wasn't like this week or even last week, but wow, what a great letter. So it says, Dear Vida family, I was lying on my bunk the other night watching your show, as I usually do, and you started reading a letter from an inmate in the Santa Rosa County Jail. As the letter progressed, tears began to well up in my eyes because I realized it was my wife who wrote it. Wow. I've been praying since the day I was sent to prison for my wife's salvation, for her to experience what true peace and happiness is, to know what freedom feels like. While listening to her letter, she wrote you into her testimony and how your show brought her to her salvation. Tears flowed from my eyes like a river because of all y'all. I know I will be in heaven with my wife. Your show brought her from darkness to light. Words cannot express my gratitude for all of you at Real Vida. Tell my wife, Allie Bronson, I love her forever and always. I am currently the chapel clerk here at Gadsden Reentry Center, and I just want you to know that your show is impacting all of us so much. The Lord is truly working miracles here, and we all just thank you for what you are doing.
Wow.
Timothy Burton at Gadsden Reentry.
Wow.
And so, this letter, I just wept when I read that letter, and I've saved it for all that time wanting to get it out. Things are just so busy.
Yeah.
So I just thought I can't let it go anymore.
Before you go to the next letter, I have to say about Gadsden Reentry, because he's at Gadsden.
Yeah.
We got a call from the chaps there this week. They said that the response to us coming has been overwhelming.
Amen.
And they wanted to know if we would be willing to do a yard service because they can't get them all inside.
Right.
And we said, of course we will.
Of course we will. Going to be hot.
Yeah, it's going to be hot. But we'll brave it for the guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
And gals.
No, Gadsden, that's the men's reentry.
Okay.
Where he is, yeah.
Okay. So, Real Vida family, I'm not good at letters. I'm just reading a portion of this. So I guess I'll start with an introduction. I've been locked up since I was 17 and will be turning 27 in September. I grew up in a Christian household, but the voice of the streets led me into the darkest alleys, and I was slowly introduced to theft and soon graduated to aggravated robbery, which is my current case. I've never been shy about calling on God, yet after stumbling over Real Vida podcast, I tend to be more receptive to the idea of submitting to the author of life, but let me move forward. Today, Real Vida came to visit us in Seg, and I'm not going to lie, I was trying to play it all cool and act like it was just another service, but out of nowhere, I see you with my own eyes, and I get this huge smile on my face. And I swear I wasn't an hour before midnight, my cheeks would have been crimson. My neighbor sees Ada and goes berserk, screaming, Ada, I love you. And I'm like, funny. Chill, bro, be calm. At the same time, I'm trying to suppress my urge to cry out for the rest of the family.
Wow.
I see Chris coming up the stairs with a field minister, and he comes straight to my door. I get a bit nervous since I've been in Seg for the past 7 years, and it's not common to see free world people in a Seg environment. Chris asked if he could pray for me, and of course I say yes. With Sam's harmonic voice in the background and the intense prayer of Chris, I almost broke down right there, but I'm still a tough guy and refused to shed a tear to betray the emotions I had. The next thing I know, I see Mama Eve and Jeremy walking by, and I'm still so moved from the prayer that all I can do is stare awkwardly at them both. While I have this semi-permanent smile plastered on my face.
Man.
Sam walks by and reminds us that she cares about us, and then Ada begins to perform. I focused as hard as I could on the lyrics of the song Ada sung. Yet I was so deeply affected by everything going on, and my heart worked and my mind was shut down.
Mm.
Ada stood on the stairs and looked at me. And that's when I truly understood that I was in the vicinity of God's people. The energy, emotions, love, and care y'all exuded was too real for me to deny. And the second time Ada looked at me while singing, I felt as if everyone came here for me personally, like I was a drowning man at sea, and the Real V, the lifeguards, were dispatched to rescue me. Then the third time Ada looked at me, I knew it was time to stop running from God and just allowed the inevitable. Every knee must bow and every head. So it's safe to say I'm back home in the arms of my Lord.
Wow.
Man, that's so cool.
So cool.
Wow.
You know, and it just shows how important it is, right?
Yeah.
Right.
How important the love of God is, and to demonstrate that love. And I'm so glad because we're only able to go, running from pod to pod. When we go to Fives and Seg in any unit, we have to rush and we don't get as much time as we want. And we're running by the doors, trying to see everybody and let everybody know we love you and we're here for you. And, we wish we could do more, and we wish we could stay at one door for the whole day, the whole hour, come back every day. We wish we could, but we can't. And so I'm always a little overwhelmed at how are they going to know? Like, how are they going to know? And I hate it when we have to leave a pod and go to another one. When I feel like, well, we haven't been in this one long enough, but I know if I don't leave this one, we can't get to the next one.
Right.
And then we won't see them at all. And so I'm just amazed at how God works and lets people know just in that instant and by his presence that he's there, that he loves them and that we love him too.
Yes.
And so I just enjoyed that letter so much.
Wow.
And thank you for writing us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing, because, in all the rush and trying to get to everybody and say hi to everybody, I don't get to pray for very many people. And so when I do get to pray for somebody, I guarantee you, we were there specifically for you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a God thing.
Yeah.
And so, that feeling you had, we were there specifically for you,
Yes.
For everyone. Every single one.
Individually, specifically for every person. I mean, it's not, you're our family. We don't just go there to just kind of come by and say hi. We want to go there to let you know that we love you and God loves you.
Do you know that there's a man that has some pet mice that are named after us?
I did not know that.
Yeah, which he had wrote and he had told me, and but apparently before, he told me before, and then when we went, I actually got to see him.
Wow.
And he had acquired more and added Ada. So
okay.
so that was pretty
so
cool.
Great.
They're named after us.
That's funny.
But what else do we have?
I knew he had pet mice. I didn't know they were named after us.
Yeah,
That's so great.
He's got the whole family.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Hey.
I'm sure you're the favorite though.
I'm probably the bossy one. So, man. We're going to take a break and then we're going to be back with what y'all are always asking for, some end time updates.
1 minute you're in the kitchen scrolling on your phone, and the next minute your talking dog is asking you, can they practice their reading?
Reading? Right. Why do you speak like this? Oh my God, I get some chicken.
Now this next one was so smooth.
That was beautiful. Will you cross that over as you got that? My love. Hey, go up. See? Do it again. My love. The technique. The technique. So bad.
You ever meet him, this tornado thing with his head is his absolute favorite.
Can you say agua? Agua. Can you say it again?
About some end times updates today. I always want to start with perspective whenever we're talking about end times. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit. It may seem unrelated, but you'll understand, I think, the reason why. This guy right here, very, very interesting guy. His name is Nik Wallenda. And a few years ago, I think it's 2013 actually, he walked a tightrope over the Grand Canyon live without any safety harnesses, without anything.
Wow.
And this guy, he comes from a family of circus performers, so he's an experienced acrobat. But Eve and Chris and I went to the Grand Canyon, 2 or 3 years ago?
Right.
It is an amazing, shocking place if you've never been. And it's very, very deep. And so
it's incredible.
The thought of walking on a tightrope across that is shocking to me. So he walked 1,400 feet in just under 23 minutes. And you see that long pole he's got there is a 43-pound balancing pole. But he had no tether and no safety net. And he is the first person documented to ever walk across the canyon. And he said, it took every bit of me to stay focused that entire time. He said, my arms are aching. Throughout the walk, he is a Christian, and several times he crouched down on the rope because the winds were so strong.
Wow.
He's walking without a safety net or harness. The winds are 30 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And he crouched down several times and says, thank you, Lord. Thank you for calming the cable, God. He was heard saying because he was mic'd up in addition to having a camera. He's 34 years old, and he was wanted to do this his whole life, apparently since childhood. This has been a goal of his. And it was broadcast live. So if he had fallen, it would have been live on the Discovery Channel. Wow. So anyway, he said later the winds were really unpredictable. He had dust on his contact lenses. I just can't imagine. And he said it was way more windy than he expected. So anyway, he's a 7th generation circus acrobat. And here's a little short video that you can see on loop there, just to give you a little idea of what it was probably like. But what really struck me about it, and here he was a few years before that, he walked over the Grand Niagara Falls, which is shocking also without a harness or a safety net.
Oh my goodness.
But what really stood out to me about it, and what I wanted to emphasize to you guys before we start on end times, is about balance. The only way that he was able to make it across is he had this 43-pound balancing pole that helped him stay centered on the rope while he was walking. Because if you lean too far to the right, you're going to fall. You lean too far to the left, you're going to fall.
Right.
Like, you've got to stay focused. You've got to stay right down the middle. And so, I just want to stress that balance is important in life. And in fact, Eve and I have been sharing with some of our guys on the inside that we have a chance to correspond with sometimes, that balance is extremely important in your pursuit of God as well. Like, okay, so water's a great thing, right? People should drink water. It's essential to survival. Most of our body is made up of water, but you can have too much water.
Right.
Exactly.
In fact, today I was reading about when Napoleon invaded Egypt, some of his soldiers were very, very thirsty walking through the desert. So as soon as they found a river, they ran to the river and they drank so much they killed themselves.
Wow.
They were afraid they were going to die of not having enough water. They died of too
goodness.
much water. It's the same thing with exercise. Exercise is good. It's important. You can exercise too much. Food is great, but you can have too much. You get sick of food after a while if you have everything that you want. So you got to have balance in everything. And so an example I would say just scripturally is we know the scripture, if you're serving God, that by grace you are saved through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. We're God's workmanship created to do good works. It says in Ephesians chapter 2, it's grace, right, that saves us. But it also says that even though we're not saved by works, if you have faith without works, your faith is dead in James chapter 2. So you've got to have balance. We're instructed to be in the world, not of the world. And I would just say it's the same with end times. There's some people who all they want to do is talk about prophecy and end times. That's all they read. And there's some people who never, ever read prophecy. They only want to read the Gospels. Or they only want to read the Old Testament. And you need balance. You need everything. So with end times, there are Christians who over the last 2,000 years, they have lived in communes or colonies. They've isolated themselves from the world. They've retreated and escaped from everything and built a big wall, and they haven't had any contact with the world. But we've got to be in the world, and we can't impact the world if we're not in the world. We just are not supposed to be of the world, right? So that's the extreme. That's fallen off the tightrope too far, too focused on heavenly things. And then the other extreme is people who don't ever think about the future, who all they just think about is the here and now. They're not focused on winning souls. They're not thinking about ultimately our obligation under the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. And so they're just living life. And that's the other extreme. This is a very famous quote from a Supreme Court justice named Oliver Wendell Holmes. He said, "Some people are so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good." Come on. And there's some Christians that are so earthly minded that they're no heavenly good, right? I mean, and we've got to be balanced. And I just wanted to share that with you before we start talking about this, because most people like the End Times podcast. Every once in a while, we get a complaint about, why are you talking about this stuff? Because it's important, because we're instructed to seek these things. In fact, Revelation says, blessed is the person who reads this book. So I'll just start with this little passage. This is a parable that Jesus told in Luke chapter 12. He said, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I'll store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And this is how it is with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. This guy was so earthly minded, he wasn't any heavenly good. So what we want to do is we want to be the house built upon the rock that Jesus talked about. And we have to understand the times that we're in. We have to understand what's going on so we can act accordingly, right? So I want to start. We're going to do it in two parts tonight. The first part is going to be some updates on headlines that could come straight out of the end times prophecies that are certainly building up to. They're the labor pains that are building towards the end of days and the day of the Lord, the return of Jesus Christ. And are going to heaven if you've accepted him as your Savior. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to talk about some other issues that I want to address. So this is our real news from around the world, and our first spot that we're going to focus on is China and Taiwan. I'll share with you some recent headlines of what's going on. We've been talking about this story for months now. So I think we had told you that there was an election that was going on in Taiwan. The two candidates were pro-China, anti-China. Actually, there were 4 candidates. 3 of them were mostly pro-China, and 1 of them was mostly anti-China. The anti-China is more considered the ally of the United States, and the other ones were ultimately going to be controlled by China. So the anti-China candidate won the presidency just a couple of weeks ago, earlier in May. And he called for China immediately to stop their intimidation after being sworn into a historic 3rd term. The reason why the Taiwanese are electing this party is because they know that war is coming. They know that China is about to try and take them back. And so they want to foster policies that are about defending their island and being close to the United States, because the U.S. is the only way that they can beat China. So immediately after that, after they elected the anti-China presidential candidate, China starts punishment military drills around Taiwan, days after the island swore in a new leader. Now, this was interesting because they were doing war games and drills, but they were completely surrounding the island.
Right.
And had they decided, one day they're going to do a drill that's not a drill.
Right.
And then they're going to just start the invasion. And so everyone was on edge because the island was surrounded. They're that much closer. They're already there. And it would have shortened the advance notice time that they would have received in order to defend themselves. And of course, for the United States to make a decision. Are we going to war or not against China over Taiwan? So China said the military drills encircling Taiwan were designed to test its ability to seize power, is literally what they said. So, of course, Taiwan scrambled their jets. They put their entire military on high alert. And The United States, of course, was also on high alert in the region. And of course, whenever stuff is popping up anywhere in the world, the United States sends an aircraft carrier. The United States aircraft carriers are considered the preeminent military power in the whole world. There's no weapon that is more powerful than a U.S. aircraft carrier. So whenever we want to intimidate or make our presence known, we always send an aircraft carrier group. So China kicked off these 2 days of military drills, and the USS Ronald Reagan, just as I was saying, is an aircraft carrier that sailed into the Philippine Sea. And so that situation is getting hotter and hotter. The birth pains are getting closer and closer. And we're going to talk some more about China in a few minutes as it relates to Russia. So here's our second area we're going to talk about today. It's Iran and just complete Middle East chaos. So there was a story that came out a couple of weeks ago. There was a helicopter crash, and in the helicopter was 2 very important high-ranking officials in the Iranian government, the president, and I believe the foreign minister.
Right.
And of course, a lot of people are saying, I mean, how dumb can you be? Why would you ever put those 2 people on the same helicopter? Because that's just asking for trouble.
Right.
Helicopters are notoriously dangerous. In fact, the way that you're most likely to hear about U.S. military service members dying is an aircraft. I mean, a helicopter crash, usually in training. So anyway, as soon as it happened, it was big news. And Chris and I were both like texting each other. And it's like, okay, was this Israel? That's what everyone was wondering at first. Did Israel take out the president of Iran? Obviously, that would have been considered an act of war if that was proven. But the other thing, too, this guy was extremely disliked by the Iranian people and other people in the Iranian government. There was a long list of people that wanted him dead. In fact, he is known as the Butcher of Tehran because he had been the primary person that was responsible for stamping out some revolts and some, protests that had happened before. And the Iranian government sent him out as kind of the bad guy. And now he's the president. Or was. So anyway, it's unclear who killed him or if it was just a mechanical failure of the helicopter. But Israel immediately came out and said it wasn't us because they knew everybody was suspecting that. They came out and said, no, we didn't do it. And in fact, if Israel had done it, they probably would have done it in a different way anyway. So there were international messages of condolence and support for Iran. The United Nations Security Council held a moment of silence to observe the Butcher of Tehran's passing, which tells you everything you need to know about the United Nations. Israel was outraged by it and said it was tantamount to honoring a terrorist because that's what they believe that he is, or honoring Hitler because he's a person with a lot of blood on his hands. And so anyway, I mean, one of the Israeli politicians said, you read correctly, the UN Security Council today held a moment's silence to remember a mass murderer. And of course, in the same time, there's still 130, anywhere from 75 to 130 hostages in the Gaza Strip held by Hamas that, have not been returned to Israel yet. And so that's kind of, Israel's problems. Why are we worried about this when we've got our hostages still there? So anyway, this guy that died was responsible for the persecution of Christians in Iran. There has been an increase in persecution of Christians, which is always bad, but it's been especially bad in the last year or so. And this guy is responsible for that. There were about 134 arrests in 2022 of Christians in Iran. There were 166 in 2023. And most of those, or about half of those arrests, were for possessing a copy of the Bible.
Wow.
Possessing a copy of the Bible. And of course, being in an Iranian prison is a different kind of torture. Some would say worse than death. So that was what was going on. There was some speculation about what may have caused it. There's already speculation about who is going to replace him. And that's the real question. Was he killed by opponents in the Iranian government, because there's a lot of people who think that he has not been tough enough, and there's other ones who think he's been too tough. So the question and what everybody's concerned about is who's going to replace him.
Right.
If he's someone who's more militant, he's more likely to push Iran into war with Israel and the United States. And so there's real questions still about who's going to succeed the supreme leader, Khamenei. I never pronounce it right. All right. So back to Israel in the same region. Just 2 days ago from the day of this recording, this is May 31st when we're recording this podcast. 2 days ago, an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip accidentally killed dozens of Palestinians. The Israeli military and government immediately came out and said that was a big mistake. We didn't mean to.
Right.
It was just our fault. And so, of course, that's adding fuel to the fire of the people in the United Nations and in Europe that are already really after Israel to stop the war, to get out of Gaza, and to grant Palestinian statehood. So some of the European nations, this is huge news, and I don't know if you've heard this yet, 3 European nations recognized a Palestinian state: Spain, Ireland, and Norway. So it is the beginning of the move towards recognition of the Palestinian state by first Europe. Of course, you've got Europe, who's closely allied to the United States in NATO, and the United States, who have differing positions on Israel, which is why you can already see that a train wreck is coming here. It's just developing. All right. So now we're going to talk about the U.S. border crisis. If you saw one of our previous podcast, we showed you the video of hundreds of thousands of immigrants streaming across the border. And immigrants are one thing, but these were military-age males from countries that are sworn enemies of the United States, like China,
mostly from China,
Pakistan, Syria, mostly from China. And so we had a lot of actually response to the video and that podcast that we showed those videos. So this is related to that earlier story. On just 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, Immigration and Customs confirmed that 2 Jordanians were both in the U.S. illegally and attempted to breach the Marine Corps base, Quantico, Virginia.
Right.
And so this was a huge news story, really, but you heard very little about it because the mainstream media was covering it up because it's the wrong narrative. So one of these Jordanians entered the U.S. illegally, was caught by the Border Patrol, and they let him go.
Right.
So he was on his way to commit ostensibly a terrorist act on the Marines at the base in Quantico. And he had been detained, but they let him go, which is the problem with the catch and release system they have right now at the border. Okay, so the other Jordanian immigrant had been here legal in the United States, but he overstayed his visa. His visa had expired, and he illegally crossed the border as well. So this is the bad part. The military, they hid this breach from the Marines. They didn't want the Marines to know that they had caught 2 Jordanians trying to get onto the base, ostensibly to commit a terrorist act. And so you have to ask yourself why. Why wouldn't that be something everybody's talking about? Why aren't we planning?
We really should have put them on high alert. Like, okay, they tried to do this. You better stay alert because it could be again,
another
or
base.
There could be others.
Yes. Absolutely. Another base or this base. Absolutely.
Well, just before we went on air tonight, I saw a headline that says Navy commander confirms dozens of penetration operations by foreign nationals reported at U.S. bases over the last few weeks.
Wow.
So it's starting to come out that wasn't an isolated incident.
Yes.
This has been happening at dozens of U.S. bases over the last couple of weeks.
My goodness.
Yes, it's all ramping up. And so Senator Lindsey Graham asked Mayorkas, who's the head of ICE, in a congressional hearing after this came out, asked if the Jordanian nationals, either of them, were on the terror watch list. And he didn't get a straight answer to that question, which means what? He was on the terror watch list. And they caught him and let him go. And had Americans been killed, it would have been on the hands of the government. I mean, because they had the opportunity to stop it. So obviously this is a story, and the headline that the news that Chris just broke while we're on this podcast is news to me. I hadn't heard that story yet. we're going to hear a lot more about these stories. And I'm very concerned that it's going to lead to the loss of American lives and tragedies on American soil. All right. So the next story, and I hate to say it, it's still the biggest one in the world right now because of what the implications could be, is the Russia-Ukraine war. So I'm going to show you a little bit. And actually, I prepared part of this podcast a week or so ago. And the news, we weren't able to do it because of all the stuff Eve was talking about until today. And the news has changed and evolved so much since
daily.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, as Chris said, it's happening while we're recording. And by the time we release it tomorrow, it's probably going to change again. Okay. So Russia opened up a northern front. Most of the war in Ukraine has been on the eastern and southern portion of Ukraine. And so Russia has now opened up a northern front. They're coming from different directions.
Right.
Because what they're doing is they're trying, it's good military strategy, of course. If they're only in one area, then Ukraine sends all their defenders there. If they send into multiple different areas, then of course you stretch out the line and you have chances for a breakthrough. So Ukraine is out loud saying, because, Ukraine is always just like Russia, just like the United States, just like any nation. They're always going to be trying to put their best foot forward.
Right.
It's called public relations, right? Propaganda would be a better word for it. Even though Ukraine has a vested interest in giving the whole world the best, rosiest picture of how things are doing, even Ukraine is saying now in May of 2023, this situation's getting bad. Right. Russia is overtaking us. We're beginning to have to retreat. They're capturing villages. Thousands of people are fleeing the Russian offensive in the Kharkiv region. If you don't know anything about Ukraine, Kharkiv is the second largest city in Ukraine, and it's on the eastern side, close to Russia, so it's in a lot of danger. So Ukraine is withdrawing troops as the Russian offensive is gathering pace, and now Ukraine is dealing on 5 fronts with the Russians, so it's pushing their troops and their weapons to the limit. And so people have been saying over the last few weeks, hey, maybe Putin's going to win after all. We thought for sure he was going to lose. He may win this war. And of course, the globalists and the Western media are already beginning to say it's the United States Congress's fault because Ukraine didn't get the weapons from the United States in time. And so that's what's given the Russians the ability to have this momentum or whatever. So y'all need to send more arms is what these stories are saying. Well, so it's working, right? As Russia advances, NATO is now talking in the last week or so about sending trainers into Ukraine. Chris and I were talking earlier today. Right. Putin is saying they've already got lots of trainers in the Ukraine. They're just not wearing their badges.
They're not in
their
official
flags.
Capacity.
They're mercenaries, but there's soldiers, no doubt, from the United States and from the UK and other nations from NATO that are already there as advisors, is what they call them. Of course, here's the thing. Ukraine has been very effective, especially in the use of drones to attack Russia. They don't have good enough intelligence to do that. Everyone who knows that the only way Ukraine has been so successful is the United States is feeding them the information from our satellites. Hit them here, hit them here. And, you and I can talk about it, but Putin and all his soldiers and his generals know that the United States is the reason why that tank got blown up and that jet got shot down. They know that. And so it's like if I didn't like somebody, I had beef with them, and I hand somebody else my gun and I load it for them and I chamber around and say, shoot him.
Right.
But I didn't shoot him. Am I still responsible?
Right.
Well, of course. I'm the one who instigated it. And so that's where things are now. Now, in the last few days prior to this podcast being recorded, the U.S. is talking out loud about lifting a ban on Ukraine using American-supplied weapons to strike inside Russia. Chris and I could put 20 videos from President Biden, generals in the U.S. saying there's going to be no U.S. weapons attacking Russia.
Right.
They're now saying, okay, we're going to give them. And why are they doing it? Because Russia was beginning to win and they were beginning to get momentum. So Putin has been really clear about this from the beginning. If you give them weapons to use against our people, specifically against our soldiers, but also strike Russia, that's an act of war.
Right.
He's been saying that. Here's another headline from last week saying the momentum's clearly building for NATO troops to actually be in Ukraine, fighting alongside Ukrainians, which is crazy. That's World War III.
Right.
No question. That's World War III. So yesterday, or that was earlier today, Putin ally, which is actually the ex-president Dmitry Medvedev, issued a nuclear weapons warning to NATO. He said, if you're attacking, well, Chris, why don't you explain what they did in the last few days to Russia?
Oh, wow. So, okay, well, it's crazy because it's almost as if they want a war. They, Putin and all his guys have been saying, look, if Ukraine uses NATO weapons inside of Russia, we will, and they're not just saying war, they're implicating nuclear war. They're saying, and depending on who says it, Putin's a little bit more political about how he says it, but all the implications are a nuclear attack if they allow Ukraine to do it.
Yeah.
So the next few days after that, you're hearing all these officials from Europe, all the European nations, and even from the United States saying, we're going to allow Ukraine to use these weapons inside of Russia.
Right.
And so that's their response. Instead of saying, well, maybe we don't need to think about it, their response is pedal to the metal, full blow. Here we go. And then tonight,
I triple dog dare you.
Yeah. And then tonight, now there's reports of missile attacks coming from Ukraine inside the Belgorod region in Russia.
Yes.
And
Russian territory.
Doing exactly what, Putin said don't do, or, cities are going to burn, basically.
Right. We're going to show a little bit of video of those attacks in a second, but they're issuing nuclear weapons warnings to NATO. Permission to fire into Russia is getting Ukraine kind of amped up. I mean, they think that the United States and all our homies are about to come in the war with them.
Right.
And so they're getting pretty excited.
And that's another thing that Russia said. He said, any NATO troops in any official capacity, he don't care what they are,
trainers,
or what they're there
whatever.
For,
yeah, right.
Any of that will constitute will create a war with NATO. A worldwide war is what he said. And it's been confirmed today that France is officially going to send their troops, which are NATO troops, in an official capacity into Ukraine to train Ukrainian soldiers, which is exactly what Putin said. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Any NATO troops in any official capacity is an act of war.
So this headline is the most shocking because this is the kind of stuff I would expect to be going on behind the scenes. But this is CNN reporting this. So we're saying it out loud. Biden gave Ukraine permission to carry out limited strikes within Russia using U.S. weapons.
Right.
So Putin is reading those headlines. And Putin is a guy that does not back down. Like, he's a guy that he says, if you knock this chip off my shoulder, I'm going to punch you in the mouth.
Right.
And you knock the chip off the shoulder, he's going to have to punch you in the mouth because he can't lose face. In fact, there's been a lot of analysis I've read that because Putin is in a somewhat of unstable position in Russia, depending on how this war goes, he has to pedal to the metal, push the gas down.
And it's not just that. In the past week and a half, Ukraine has hit radar sites inside of Russia.
That's what I wanted you to mention.
These radar sites are not like regular looking for aircraft. These are their nuclear early warning radar sites. They're specifically for that and nothing else. These are the radars that Russia uses to see incoming nuclear missiles.
Right.
And so Ukraine has been trying to blind them to incoming nuclear weapons. And so if somebody were knocking out all of our radars that we use to monitor nuclear weapons, what would we think?
It'd be war.
We would think they're about to strike us with the nuclear weapons, and so they're trying to blind us to that. I mean, it's crazy what's going on.
Absolutely crazy. So we're going to show a little bit of that video right here. All right, so we're back. Putin warned again that Russia is ready to use nuclear weapons if its sovereignty is threatened. When you're sending rockets or missiles into Russian territory, that's threatening their sovereignty. Putin also threatened the West's densely populated territories with grave consequences for allowing weapons sent to Ukraine to be used in strikes. That means I'm going to launch nuclear missiles on your large cities. Right. That's the only way to interpret that statement. All right. So that's the news for right now. We're going to take a song break and then we'll be back to talk some more about the end times. Hey guys, we're back. All right, so I'm going to tell you an old story and talk about how it relates to the end times. And we've talked before about history repeats itself. I've got my history shirt on today. It says, it's only treason if you lose. It's George Washington.
Come on.
It's only treason if you lose. But history does repeat itself. And really, human nature from the beginning of time and the sin nature makes people act the same. That's one of the reasons why history repeats itself. People are greedy.
Right.
People want power. People, are obsessed with doing their own thing and controlling. And so those kinds of sin nature tendencies cause people to do the same things throughout time, regardless of culture or anything else. So this story goes way back. It goes back before the beginning of human history, back to Isaiah chapter 14. And Isaiah 14 talks about the fall of Lucifer, who was, an angel of God. He was a praise and worship leader, is what a lot of people say that he was in heaven before he fell. And this chapter actually chronicles how that came to pass. It's a prophetic passage. But it says in Isaiah 14, verse 12, how you are fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to the earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world. For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I will preside on the mountains of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. And I always thought it's interesting how many times the word I is used by Lucifer in that passage because he had this focus on himself, and it caused him to lose sight of his worship of God, who he is created to worship. He instead worshiped himself. And so, I think it's interesting too that it says there, you've destroyed the nations of the world. And that's what we literally see is happening right now, is the nations of the world are being driven to war by the enemy, is really what's behind all of this. He's the puppet master, right? And so you go now to Genesis chapter 3. And you see in Genesis chapter 3 that Adam and Eve were deceived and they rebelled against God's command. And so Lucifer had them eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And there's this conversation that takes place in heaven about if they eat from the tree of life, they'll live forever. They want to be like God, that's why Lucifer, Satan, tricked them, is because he played on their desire to be as God. And so that takes us now to Genesis chapter 11 and the Tower of Babel. And it says there, at one time, all the people of the world spoke the same language and used the same words. And as the people migrated to the east, they found a plain in the land of Babylonia and settled there. And they began saying to each other, let's make bricks and harden them with fire. In this region, bricks were used instead of stone and tar was used for a mortar. And then they said, come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world. So there's this desire that's built into our sin nature, really, to make ourselves like God. And that's been going on, from the beginning of human history. In fact, whenever a dictator gets lots of power, like one of the Caesars or, the pharaohs in Egypt, it's anywhere, Genghis Khan, they began to think of themselves, they were so powerful, as being like a god.
Right.
Because that's what the sin nature does. And that is exactly what's going on with the 3 stories that we're going to talk about today. There's stuff ripped straight out of the headlines and the news. But I want you to understand that these kinds of things, this desire to be like God, is a spirit of Antichrist that is pushing the world and the leaders of the world towards the end of time and the beast system, the Antichrist, and all the things that are still to come. So now I'm going to show you this image. And I think that this is a great image. You don't need any words to see what's about to happen here. This guy's sitting there and he pushes over the domino, right? And the domino's starting to fall. And ultimately, what's going to happen?
They're all going to fall.
Yeah. And where are they going to fall?
On him.
On
That's
him.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is my image for the law of unintended consequences. So I want to talk to you about 3 things that mankind is doing right now in our desire to be like God and control things that we really have no control over, how the law of unintended consequences is already beginning to come into effect. Because guess what? We're not God. And we don't have the ability to be God. And whenever we try it, it always ends badly. So there's 3 things. And the first one is weather manipulation. And so people are obsessed with the weather. People talk about the weather. If you don't know somebody and you meet them, you start talking about the weather sometimes. Not my honey. She doesn't like shallow conversations. So she does not want to talk about the weather, right? But weather has been important since the beginning of time, because especially back when we were agrarian society, the weather determined whether or not you could eat.
Right.
It determined whether or not you could grow the food and eat, and survive, right? And so there's always been a desire to control weather. And people cultures around the world have had a desire to make the weather obey them, right? And so here's a rain dance. And this isn't something unusual. Cultures all over the world have different things that people did trying to control the weather. In fact, Eve was talking about Baal a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about strange fire. And Baal, they worshipped Baal, the idol, and they tried to do that to manipulate Baal into sending the right kind of weather so they could have good crops, right? And so, strangely, even though we would think that now we're this advanced intellectual society, we're still trying to control the weather, just like the people who worship Baal and just like the rain dances. And except now we've got more technological ways to manipulate and control the weather. And one of those is cloud seeding. So it's very interesting. This has been going on for a long time. And, you hear talk about chemtrails and other things, and people will say that it's conspiracy theory and that it's not true. And it's a 100% true thing. In fact, it's been going on in the United States since the 1940s.
Right.
And so here's the process. I put it up on the screen. Silver iodide is released by a plane or a ground-based generator, or they use rockets or missiles even. Silver iodide particles reach the targeted cloud. The silver iodide aids in the formation of ice crystals, and then they become large enough to fall and create snow, is one of the processes that they use. Sometimes they drop flares from above the cloud formation. Sometimes they shoot the flares into the clouds, but all of it, the purpose is to make the clouds that have the moisture release the moisture in the place where they want it to. Now, nobody's got a joystick. Nobody's able to control the cloud and make it go exactly where they want to go. And there's no turn-off switch to say, okay, that's enough water. No, turn it off. That's too much. Well, that's the problem, right? So I'll start with this headline. And Chris is a weather nut. And we've told y'all that before. He was obsessed with weather when he was a kid.
I literally used to watch the Weather Channel when everybody else was watching cartoons. I would sit in my parents' room and I would watch the Weather Channel when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And like for years. I mean, that was just what I did.
Chris knows a lot about a lot of things, but he knows a whole lot about the weather because he's so addicted to it. And we've been having these conversations lately. Every day you turn on the news, every day there's a tornado happening somewhere in the United States.
Yes.
And so we found this
much more severe than we've ever seen.
Right.
Absolutely. So it says something very strange is happening to tornadoes across the U.S. and scientists are baffled.
Right.
Like they don't know why. Why is this happening? Why are we having so many tornadoes everywhere? And severe, strong tornadoes too, destructive tornadoes. So I'll show you this headline now. This happened about a month or so ago. There's a horrible flooding in Brazil. In the Brazil floods, death toll near 90. Rescue efforts continue. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. And of course, it affected the poor. In the impoverished communities, most of all. And so here's a picture of some of the devastation that's gone on in Brazil. And we may show some video also right now. Here's another headline. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, was deluged after a historic storm dumps record rain across the desert nation. Now, this is a nation that gets just a few inches a year. Typically, they average almost no rain, and they've had these storms. Did you see any of the video of those storms on Facebook when it happened?
I saw the snow in Egypt.
Yeah,
all kinds, places, lots of places that don't get snow are are getting snow, lots of snow.
Yes.
Right.
So here's just a picture of that storm there in Dubai, which is the capital of the United Arab Emirates. It's a crazy, crazy storm. Here is just a picture of a forest fire in California. And the reason that I brought this up, and we're going to talk more about the cloud seeding. When man thinks they're doing something smart, it's the law of unintended consequences. So California has been ravaged by fires for the last 20 years. In fact, the last year or two has been the first times they haven't been severely ravaged by fires because they're getting extra precipitation right now, probably because of cloud seeding. But these fires that swept through California, one of the reasons why they spread so quickly is because the environmentalists in their wisdom cleaned out or did not clean out the underbrush. Typically before they were doing forest management, they were cleaning out the underbrush. The underbrush is the tinder that starts the fires.
Right.
So when the forests have been cleaned of that underbrush, a lightning will strike, but a fire won't spread. But because we didn't clean or manage the forests, they were like just waiting for a match.
Right.
And they went up hundreds of thousands of acres, many times endangering millions of people in California. Here is Texas earlier this week. And they're beginning to call this, I mean, we've heard of, nickel-sized hail, quarter-sized hail, baseball-sized hail, softball-sized hail. They had to invent a new term for this hail. They're calling it DVD-sized hail because it's so big. It's 5 to 6 inches across.
Right. Huge. And they issued it's called a PDS, emergency, particularly dangerous storm for the first time. For a storm that didn't have a tornado because the hail was so big that if it hit you, it could kill you.
My God.
Right. And in fact, several times over the last few weeks, Chris and I would talk about the forecast because we're working outside on property and doing different things. And we say, is it supposed to rain tomorrow? No, I don't. Slight chance. And then the next day, there's this huge thunderstorm.
It's pouring down rain.
Everything changes. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the map of the countries that are using active cloud seeding. And there's the maps. And what you're going to see there in blue, let me see if I can do this.
56 countries.
56 countries.
With active cloud seeding.
Chris, over there, can you see my little, my pointer?
No. Okay, I can see that.
Okay, so there's Brazil. Brazil that we just saw the huge floods in. Here's the United Arab Emirates over here near the Persian Gulf. Here's the United States where we're seeing DVD-sized hail, particularly dangerous substances, and, of course, tornadoes everywhere.
And I don't know, in Houston that they just had that big storm and high rise got windows all blown out. I mean, it was really, really bad.
And that caught the National Weather Service off guard, too. They didn't expect that. That came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That wasn't.
How funny how things are unpredictable these days. Right. They can't tell. The weather can't predict it anymore. It can't be predicted.
Right.
It just is showing up. There, of course, there was a tornado touchdown here in Tyler, near Brett's house.
It blew away the marina for our boat.
Yeah.
Right. We're waiting on finding out our boat get dug out of the debris or whatever right now. So
So these are the countries that are actively doing cloud seeding. But remember, when you seed a cloud, you don't know where that rain is going to drop.
Right.
And also, of course, the other thing is we're not making more water. The atmosphere has a limited amount of water in it. There's a lot of water on the Earth's surface and in the atmosphere, but we're not minting new money. We're not making new water, right? And so if you are causing rain to drop on one place, then it's necessarily not going to drop somewhere else that it was going to drop before, which is why I show you this picture here. And so there are now, especially Iran, here's this headline, Cloud Wars, Mideast rivalries rise along a new front. So the UAE, remember that picture we showed you of Dubai and the storm in Dubai, is leading the effort to squeeze more rain out of the clouds, and other countries are rushing to keep up. Well, I think that you see the answer to why they're having those rainstorms right there. UAE is an extremely wealthy country. And so they've got plenty of money to experiment with cloud seeding. And of course, they're trying to increase their rainfall, and they may have increased it too much. Here's another headline that says droughts and cloud seeding and the coming water wars. In fact, one of the countries, interestingly enough, that is most upset about cloud seeding is Iran. And Iran is upset with the UAE, which is a United States ally, and Israel, who they already hate and call the little Satan, and have said they want to eliminate them and wipe them off the face of the earth. Because they're saying that Israel and the UAE's cloud seeding is robbing them of the precipitation that their country would have got.
Right.
Well, what does that do? If your country's not getting precipitation and you have a drought, then you can't grow the food and people starve.
Right.
Are people going to go to war over these water wars? 100%.
Where is it that you told me you just heard on the news?
It was in Africa. They were so hungry in Sudan. Yes, right now. They're so hungry in Sudan that I read an article this week that a man was watching as his wife and children were digging down into the ground and making balls of mud and swallowing it with water because the famine is so great.
Wow.
So things are terrible. But wait, there's more on weather manipulation. This is what is called HAARP.
Right.
So HAARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Is a scientific endeavor to study the properties and behavior of the Earth's ionosphere. The ionosphere is 50 to 400 miles above the Earth's surface, right at the edge of space. And it's the boundary between the lower and the upper atmosphere, right? And so operation of this research facility was previously ran by the military. It got transferred in 2015 to the University of Alaska at Fairbanks, which I personally believe that there's a reason why the military passed it off to private, because less oversight if it's private. It is the world's most capable high-power, high-frequency transmitter for studying the ionosphere. And so what it does, this transmitter, it excites the electrons in the ionosphere, essentially.
It's an ionosphere heater.
Yes.
They're pumping energy into the ionosphere to try to, I know what they're saying. They're saying they're trying is to study the ionosphere, but it's
more.
Yes. Well, and they're increasing the electrification, essentially, of the ionosphere in Alaska, close to the close to the Arctic ice cap, right? And what have you been hearing in the last 25 to 30 years? That the ice cap is melting.
Right.
And so the sea levels are rising because the Arctic ice is receding. And so, scientists will say that it's just conspiracy theorists that are worried about HAARP, but it's not true. Actually, in Canada, they're extremely concerned about it. They did a documentary on Canadian Public Broadcasting Corporation, and also the European Union said that it's a global concern, and they passed a resolution asking for more information on it and that it be studied and the global health risks.
And it's not the only array like that. China has an array like that. Russia has an array like that.
Yes.
And there's several other countries that UAE has built an array like that. I mean, it's, if it's just for testing purposes, why are all these other countries rushing to build it? The same thing.
Well, and so what everybody is saying is this is part of the U.S. military's attempt to stay ahead of the curve for military dominance. In fact, there was a Air Force study where they basically said the United States military is going to own the weather by 2025.
Right.
And they did that 20 years ago.
2000, I think, 1 or 2002 when they wrote that paper.
It was over 20 years ago that they said that. And here we are in 2024.
Right.
And so I believe they're on target, right? And they had a stated goal of full spectrum dominance as well, including the weather. So there's the people that are concerned about HAARP state that it is causing earthquakes, it's causing hurricanes, it's causing tsunamis, it's going to disrupt global communication systems and other real problems. So, I saw some articles saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with HAARP. There's nothing to see here. This is really no concern at all. But if you're causing the the ions in the ionosphere to get excited, as they said, it is essentially heating them up is what it's doing.
That's exactly what it's doing.
And I thought about what is the one thing they tell us every summer about when it's hurricane season, especially if you live in Florida or the Gulf, they always say the Gulf waters are heating up. And so, when the Gulf waters heat up.
I heard today that off the coast of Florida, it's 90 degrees in the water already.
It's shocking.
Yes.
Wow. And it's not even June yet.
Right.
Yeah, today's May 31st. So I just put this picture up with the sea surface temperatures. They're always saying that the sea surface temperatures going up increases the risk of hurricanes. How can they tell us with a straight face that exciting the ions in the ionosphere is not going to affect the global weather patterns?
Right.
In fact, one of the things I saw today is they admit that it has the power to change the jet stream. The jet stream is the number one source of our weather patterns.
Right. It drives the weather patterns.
It drives the weather. So, all right. So just a few more things about HAARP. They're kept secret because of national security. But if it can't cause any harm, then why is it a national security risk?
Right.
I have here, I printed out earlier. It's fascinating. This is the patent for HAARP from 1987 from the scientists from Spring, Texas, actually, that got a patent on the technology used for it. There's no doubt that there are electromagnetic weapons. And so when they tell you they spent $300 million on HAARP,
right.
You know that it's something that is of national security importance. It has to be. All right. So experiments were conducted at HAARP to fire pulse-directed energy beams in order to temporarily excite a limited area of the ionosphere. And many scientists stated that purposely disturbing this sensitive layer could have major and even disastrous consequences. And it's the guy with the dominoes, right? Like, how can they not know, hey, maybe we should not do this because we don't know what the result is going to be. There's a HAARP researcher named Dr. Michael Chesadovsky of the University of Ottawa in Alaska and Dr. Nick Begich, who is the son of a U.S. congressman. Both presented evidence suggesting that the disturbances caused by HAARP could cause earthquakes, hurricanes, and other problems. So here's what the scientists tell you. They say, believe the scientists.
Right.
These U.S. scientists are saying, the military is saying there's nothing to see here. There's no problem whatsoever. And when I saw those articles today, this is who came to mind.
Yeah.
This guy right here, Anthony Fauci, who was the front and center scientist during the COVID pandemic.
Right.
And everything that this man said, and for me to say what I'm about to say 3 years ago would have been extremely politically correct. But now I'm going to say it because it's factually accurate. All of these things I'm about to say are all supported.
Politically incorrect.
Oh, did I say politically correct? Yeah, no, you're right. They would have been politically incorrect.
Right.
But now I'm going to say them because they're factually accurate.
Right.
And have been proven to be. So at first they said that there's no way that COVID could have come from the lab in the Wuhan province of China. It instead originated in this wet market. They've now basically admitted it came from the lab.
Right.
Because they were doing gain-of-function research on this exact type of virus. And the United States government knew about it, and many people, including government agencies, had money invested in those labs.
Right.
So they said, no, it didn't. Well, yeah, maybe it did. Then they said, these vaccines are completely safe.
Right.
Well, then they said, they're not completely safe. Then they said, if you get the vaccine, you can't get sick.
Right.
Well, actually, the people who had the vaccine got sicker than the people who didn't.
Right.
And so it's just one thing after another. But Chris found a really good video that we're going to play here about believing the science.
sure we clarify that with people. It has nothing to do whether or not it's effective. We know it's highly effective. Highly effective.
Okay, so we're back, and I don't necessarily believe the scientists when the scientists are people who are paid to say the things that they're saying. And most of the people who were marched out during the pandemic to talk about the safety of the vaccines were people who were receiving their money from the pharmaceutical companies.
Well, and I'll say this: the whole basis of science is questioning things.
Right.
And so, if somebody comes out and says, "Don't question me," then they're going against what science really is about. Science is about asking questions and trying to disprove theories so that you can strengthen your base of knowledge. So any scientist that says you can't question what I'm saying is
already suspect in my book. Yeah. All right. So I want to go to our next area in which humans are attempting to play God now. And so this topic is the singularity. We've talked quite a bit about artificial intelligence on the show. But I want to just kind of talk about what the singularity is. It's the theoretical point at which artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence. And this term comes from a mathematics term, refers to a point that's unpredictable. It's not easy to define. Many experts believe we're getting close to singularity. And by singularity, I mean close. It could be 5 to 10 years, 15 years is the most that I've heard.
Right.
And some people are excited about singularity because they think it's going to be this fantastic melding of humans and machines. In fact, Elon Musk right now has the neural chip that's implanted in a guy with some disabilities. And so they're experimenting with this chip being implanted. He's able to control, maybe we can slide in some video of that. If we can't get it on this podcast, we'll get it later. With his mind, he's able to control computer cursors and move things.
Yeah, no, I saw a video of him. He said he was able to send emails, order food. I mean, anything that you can do on the internet, he's able to do just by thinking about it.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So some futurists think the singularity is inevitable. And some actually scientists are very concerned about what the implications are going to be for humans. And so they're trying to create artificial intelligence that's still, it's like the genie in the bottle. They're trying to keep Pandora's box, Pandora in the box, basically. So here's some of the concerns about the singularity. Is that machines could become so intelligent that it's impossible for humans to control them. Chris and I are going to do some experiments with AI and show them to you like live on the podcast at some point. It is shocking, truly, what AI is capable of.
And it's happening so fast. It's crazy fast. I just found a thing today where I can generate a song that sounds pretty good just by typing in what I want it to do. And it's a whole song, and it has the voice of the vocalist, the music, everything. It's crazy.
The lyrics, everything. Yeah. So one of the concerns is if we begin to automate more and more, and we're putting artificial intelligence and computers in control of certain processes, for example, like traffic is one of the examples that I read about. If there was an emergency and artificial intelligence was in control of the traffic patterns, it might reroute all traffic away from a hospital because it made the decision, there's an emergency, we've got to do this.
Right.
But it could end up resulting in people getting really sick, not being able to get medical care. It could cause collisions and other kinds of things when you take the human element out. Also, there's the possibility of self-improving AI systems. That means that machines could evolve beyond the human understanding and control. And if you can't understand it, it's impossible to control it, right? To the point where the machines would develop their own goals and motivations. I mean, most of the people watching this podcast, if you grew up and went to school, you learned basic programming. When I was in high school, we learned basic programming, right? And you'd write a piece of code and it would do what you told it to do. But what happens now, artificial intelligence is writing its own code.
Right.
And so what if the product of the artificial intelligence is not something that's beneficial to humans?
Right.
What if it's beneficial to the machines instead, which we'll talk about in a second? Economic disruption. There's all kinds of headlines already about how many jobs have been displaced because of artificial intelligence.
I will say, like, unless you see it out here and you can see video and you can see what things are being done already,
right,
it's hard to grasp. So, so those that have been behind bars for a really long time or don't know anything about it or never seen it, they can't grasp what you're saying unless they would see video, really.
Chris and I are going to have to do one of those videos soon because it's going to blow your mind. We're going to type in a prompt, and within seconds, you're going to get a whole story written by the computer.
Like
that's
hundreds and hundreds of words. It just spits it right out, and it sounds good. I mean, it's crazy.
So, I mean, there's estimates that it could displace hundreds of millions of jobs, the rise of artificial intelligence in the coming years.
In the next few years.
Yes.
Very quickly.
Yeah. Well, there's already headlines all the time about layoffs due to artificial intelligence. There's jobs that are no longer necessary. All right. So obviously, one of the biggest concerns is the possibility of AI-powered warfare, the development of intelligent machines. Of course, the military, all militaries around the world are investing heavily in AI.
Right.
The U.S., China, Russia, UK, of course, Saudi Arabia, any place with money, and Iran, North Korea, they're investing in artificial intelligence. When there's a human at the switch, and I don't know, I've never told that story, but a human averted global nuclear war, a Soviet.
Right.
You know that story, right?
Yeah, I do.
They received news that would have typically caused them to launch their nuclear, ballistic missiles. It's around 1983.
Right.
And he did not trust the intelligence that they had received, and he ended up not doing it. And had he done it, the United States would have automatically responded. But he chose not to push the button. And because of that, we avoided a global nuclear war.
Right.
But if it's just a machine that's in control of those decisions, when A happens, then you do B.
Right.
Right.
Then in that situation, if AI was at the switch and the intelligence later was faulty, I mean, he nearly launched on faulty information, but a machine that didn't know it was faulty would have launched those.
Right.
So obviously, this is the concern. Here's Arnold, the Terminator, right? And he was artificial intelligence, but he was the good guy. Ultimately, here's the bad guys.
Right.
And this is, when these movies first came out, I mean, everybody thought it was so cool when they first came out and, it was so interesting, but it was so far off.
Right.
It would be a lot less interesting if those movies came out now.
Yeah, because it's so more realistic now.
Well, you
can see it over the horizon. Yeah.
It's here. And here is the launch of a nuclear ballistic missile, which is the story of Terminator. That's ultimately what happened. AI took over and AI launched the nukes. And it could just be humans are bad. Humans kill each other. Humans are terrible. Let's get rid of the humans.
It could be as simple as indifference. When something becomes so intelligent that you're beneath it. I mean, when we build a road, we don't care about ants.
That's right.
We just kill them.
We build the road.
We build the road.
Yeah.
If there's bugs or something in the way, they're bugs.
Right.
And that's the big concern, is that it's not that it would become malevolent towards us, it's that it would become indifferent towards us.
Well, so there's obviously some cheerleaders for AI and the singularity that think, we can control it. We've got it all under control. But here's one of the best movie bad guys of all time, and I kind of agree with him. I don't think we're capable of controlling the monster that we've created. Go ahead, Chris.
It's gonna happen. The nations of the world that you just spoke about that are investing in AI, they're all racing towards AGI, which is super intelligent AI. And they're racing there because they believe it's going to give them an advantage in the world. So it's going to happen. We're going to get to that point because everybody's racing towards it.
Well, and truly supremacy, dominance in the world, whoever gets there first, and they know it.
Right.
So the third and final area in which humans are trying to play God is genetic experimentation, and they're all scary. But this may be the scariest one to me. Okay, so there's the sheep.
Dolly.
Yeah, Chris knows where I'm going. It's a cute sheep, right?
Okay.
It's a clone. That was and here's what's crazy. That sheep was cloned from a cell taken from the mammary gland of a 6-year-old sheep in an egg cell taken from another sheep. And they put it together and placed the embryo in the mama sheep, and that sheep, Dolly, was born in 1996.
Right.
That's almost 30 years ago now. So you can imagine how quickly the science has progressed about genetic experimentation. So here's just some of the animals that they have cloned now: cattle, sheep, cat, deer, dogs, horses, mules, oxen, rabbits, and rats. Those are all the different animals that have been cloned now.
That they've told us they've cloned.
Right.
Well, that was my point. Yeah, that's who they've disclosed.
Right.
And a rhesus monkey has been cloned by embryo splitting. And so as of October 2023, in this report that I read, there's no solid scientific evidence that anyone has cloned a human embryo. But I would be shocked 30 years on if that has not happened. Right. And of course, they've cloned human embryos for research purposes, what they call research cloning. And of course, the defense of it is it could lead to life-saving therapies for diseases like cancer and diabetes and Alzheimer's. But cloning is extremely difficult and can result in genetic mistakes. It took 276 attempts to clone Dolly the sheep. So every time you attempt to clone a human embryo, I believe life begins at conception because the Word of God says it. And so every time that a human embryo is created and killed, you're taking lives.
Right.
And so, of course, the potential for abuse is the scariest part of it. So here's the things that they say, this is why it's great. And it's not, even when you hear the reasons why they say it's great, it's not hard to see how this could become a problem real fast. Currently, genetic engineering allows them to select a baby's gender. They can select eye color.
Right.
They can modify the risk of certain illnesses. And of course, because they're able to identify certain chromosomes and different traits in utero, there's already people that are having abortions and killing their unborn child because I don't want another boy.
Right.
I want a girl this time. I don't want a child that has Down syndrome. I don't want a child that's got this abnormality.
Right.
And so that's already happening and has for many years. But now what they're saying they're on the border of is parents being able to engineer their children's genomes to have certain desirable traits. I want my little girl to be blonde hair and blue eyes.
Right.
I want my little boy to be tall. I don't want him to be short. I don't want him to have brown hair. I want him to have black hair, all those things is where they are right now. They're on the point of all that. And of course, it brings to mind Hitler's Third Reich, where he wanted Aryan dominance.
Right.
He wanted Aryan traits, which is crazy because he wasn't Aryan himself. Joseph Mengele was the angel of death doctor that Hitler had. And so here's this image here. It's choose your child's talent. And that's really the point that we're getting to.
Right.
So we become God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man has become God to create in form, in order, what they want.
Right.
Yes. So this is not necessarily genetic mutation, but it is man playing God. From 1979 to 2015, China had a one-child policy, and they were only allowed one child each at that time. And so what you had was many in that culture, like many cultures, but that culture more than ours certainly, men were preferred.
Right.
So if they went to the doctor and they found out they had an ultrasound and they said, you're going to have a little girl, then many people were aborting their girl because they didn't want a girl. They wanted a boy. So
or
what
giving
you have
the baby
now,
away. So the orphanages are full of baby girls.
And so what you have now is you have the law of unintended consequences in China, is that they have a whole generation of too many men and not enough women.
Right.
And so because of that, the birth rate has fallen dramatically. And there's one guy that I watch who says China is on its way down. Like, they have one generation to achieve global supremacy or whatever it is that they want, because they're not replacing in this next generation. And it's because they were having abortions, they were playing God, and they were cutting out all the girls. So it's causing the death of their whole nation. And that's what the scripture that we read at the beginning said, is Satan, Lucifer, is causing the destruction of the nations, and literally as applied to China right now with that one-child policy. So these things, they have consequences. Our decisions have consequences. And all of these things that we're talking about are because men are placing themselves in the position of God and making decisions that we never were intended to make,
right.
Don't have the right to make. And they're going to have and already are having disastrous consequences. And all those are reasons why it is important for us to have our house founded on the rock, and to know where we are in the times, to know that the birth pains are coming fast. And it is time for us to get ready. Spiritually, first and foremost, is always going to be our goal.
All right. Well, we're way beyond time. So, Chris has a lot to do.
That's because we skipped a program.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we skipped a program, we're going to give you a double.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Well, let's pray out, honey. Go ahead.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you, God, for your word that gives balance, God, and gives guidance. Lord, I just ask that you cause all of us to see the things in our life, decisions that we need to make, God, that we'd have the proper perspective at all times, that you'd cause us to be wise and discerning about the times that we're in. Lord, help us to be prepared spiritually. Help us to be the house that's on the rock. And Lord, just forgive us when we try and put ourselves in your place and make decisions and do things on our own, God. Lord, I just ask that you would lead us and guide us by your Spirit. Lord, that you'd keep us in spite of ourselves and these things that are taking place around us. We entrust ourselves to you. In Jesus' name, amen.